Back in 2014, VW brought out the e-Golf, and it was quite a quiet affair really. It was almost launched under the radar. They only sold about 120 of them. But this is the second generation e-Golf, the Mark 7.5 as they call it. Bearing in mind this is a much more serious car than the previous one, probably because in 2015 Volkswagen did something a bit fibby with diesel engines. Anyway, moving on. So the e-Golf is a very traditional take on an EV. It is the same by all accounts as the petrol and diesel derivatives of a Mark 7 facelifted Golf. So what you have is a steel car, 5-door. It has an MBQ platform, which is Volkswagen's improved platform, which enables them to share lots of components with the petrol and the diesel cars. But what makes this special visually is it has these lightweight, more aerodynamic wheels that we've seen on cars like Volvo's Drive E editions and the Vauxhall Ampera, and some blue detail which you see in the lights here. Bearing in mind the e-Golf was the first Golf, in fact the first production VW to have LED headlights. They've now been carried over to other cars. You've got blue detailing front, rear, throughout to, you know, enhance its VW eco credentials. A little bit of a covered up grille here, because although there is a radiator in there, it doesn't need as much air as a petrol or diesel engine. And then if you come around here, you realise it's got what used to be the fuel filler flap. Obviously is where you plug in, and then you can plug in your rapid charge in there. And there's a little flashing LED when you do that, and that'll tell you the state of charge if you can't be bothered to go into the car. So really it is not revolution, it's evolution. Compare this to the BMW i3, which is quite radical, quite mad, quite quirky, and lets the world know that you're driving something really new. This is the total opposite. Everything's whispered, everything's quite laid back, everything's quite subtle, and the thing about the Golf has always been classless and quite stealth. Nothing's more stealth than an electric car. So where there used to be exhaust outlets, there's now nothing, because it doesn't need it, because it's electric. Golf boots have always been really generous in size. Now what you lose on the EV compared to the combustion engine models is the false floor is not as deep. This has got your charging gubbins in here. That's 341 litres. It's still bigger apparently than the current Ford Focus, and you can split the rear seats 60-40 if you want, and you've got the little ski hatch as they call it. It's a good size boot. It's not that compromised. So whereas the old e-Golf had a realistic range of about 83 to 87 miles. The NEDC figure was something like 118. This has an NEDC range of 180 miles. So quite a lot more miles. It is slightly heavier than the old car, but it's slightly faster. To 62, it's slightly faster top speed, and it's generally got better tech on it. The e-Golf is, well, it's just a Golf inside, and that's what kind of attracts people. I'm sitting on what is, I'm told, Merlin e-cloth upholstery. A great name for it is just 3 different types of texture. And these door tops, caps here, and the dash inserts are called Iridium Matrix. So Iridium Matrix, brushed grey plastic, Merlin e-cloth. They sound like a pair of washed out Las Vegas magicians. But the point is, in here, it's a really generous 5-seater, great headroom, great knee room, class leading really. 5 seats, 5 doors, which is the only spec you can get in an e-Golf, the same as a Golf GTE. And VW clearly want to show people who have bought Golfs for years and years and years, you can just have an electric car, but you don't have to shout about it. Just, here it is. It's familiar. It just happens to not make a sound and not cost much to run. I suspect a lot of people are going to climb into this car at a VW dealer who have had Golfs before, and VW are going to want to get them into this because they want to get them out of ever so slightly cheaty diesels. So all of the drivetrain to the Golf, well, the electric motor, of which there's one, an AC motor, lives under the bonnet where the engine used to be in its brothers. And look, it's actually all visible. It's quite refreshing. You can see stuff. Brilliant. Obviously all the high voltage is orange. That's the gearbox down there, and that's a single speed gearbox. So it will rev to 12,000 RPM. It's an AC motor the Volkswagen has apparently developed in-house. However, they have admitted that the batteries are actually Panasonic, Now the batteries aren't under here, the batteries are actually under all of the seats. The driver's seat, the passenger seat, and under the rear seat. So really, in between the two axles, so in between here and here, is where the batteries live and where the platform, the floor pan of the car is bespoke to being electric. The rest of it, the visual stuff, is all just familiar Golf. So the battery storage on this new e-Golf is 35.8 kilowatt hours. So that means it's got more than a 30 kilowatt Leaf, and it's got more than a BMW i3. And in fact, it's got a better real world range than both of those cars, despite the fact they've priced it really aggressively. I think it's, with the government subsidy, it comes in at about £27,000. I have to say, it does drive better than a Leaf. And that's the thing about this Golf. Although it's quite sensible looking, and I can't believe that this white colour is actually an option that costs 238 quid or something for a white car. It's not even like metallic. What it does do is it drives like an enthusiast car should. And of course, it's a 5-seat, 5-door, sensible family hack. I've got kids, you know, I need to put them somewhere. Depeche Mode. So the e-Golf, inside, it is all Golf, as I've said before, very familiar, very kind of conservative, to be honest. But nevertheless, a whiff of class about it, quietly spoken confidence, and very quiet given that it's electric. So the display here is the same as a GTE and some of the top line Golf models. You've got 3D navigation and a lovely bit more than 9-inch touchscreen. This is all great. It will rev to 12,000 RPM, this AC single motor, but it's really quite serene in here. In fact, the only noises you can hear are probably like my microphone or something I've got in the center console, like my sunglasses. It is very quiet. The damping of the suspension is well judged. It's probably softer than an i3 BMW. The thing about a Golf is, although this car is quite sensible looking, but nevertheless it has that air of desirability about it and a proven track record of just being a damn good Golf. And everyone kind of likes Golfs. So I'm just going past some horses. Horses love electric cars, don't they? You don't really need to slow down, do you? Can't you just speed up next to horses if you've got an electric car? Anyway, what I like about this is you stick it in D like a normal automatic car. But if you knock the shifter to the left or the right, there's a plus if I knock it away from me, and there's a minus if I knock it back. Now what this is there are 5 different modes on this car, regen. When you've got it in normal D, there's no regen braking. So I'm coasting. If I let off now, it coasts really nicely. It's got low rolling resistance, 16-inch tyres. But if I knock it to plus, on here it says recuperation level 1. So when I back off the throttle, obviously the brakes will dig in a bit more. I can knock it again, recuperation level 2. If I knock it again, super aggressive regen braking. And actually this gets quite addictive, I've noticed, because I drove this car about 2.5 hours this morning. But also, if you pull it back towards me like this, there's B on the dash. What that B function is it's a manual brake. It's to simulate engine braking. But it feels like you're kind of like pulling the handbrake up while you're driving along. And you'll see on this display on the left, this dial on the left, how much regen I'm getting. So I go along and I'll just pull up the brake. So although the car is a conventional Golf, there is quite a lot of tech going on, and there is a lot of real world usable EV going on. This morning I drove it 107 miles, and I still had 29 miles left, and that was driving it in normal mode. So normal means no regen braking, 136 PS of power, 93 mile an hour top speed, and a 0 to 62 of 9.6 seconds. And then you've got another option. So there's a button next to the gear knob. Press that and you've got the 3 modes. Normal, Eco. What Eco does is it restricts your performance a little bit in the name of economy and some of the air conditioning. And what it does is it backs off the power. You're now going to get a top speed of 71 miles an hour, so just enough for the motorway. 74 PS, and I think 0 to 62 in 13 point something seconds, so just over 13 seconds. And then if you want to go super eco, press it again and you get something called Eco Plus, and that gets from 0 to 62 never, because it only ever gets to 56 miles an hour. But what it does do, of course, is it backs off the throttle response and everything else and maximizes your range. So you can play with those three things. Or what I did this morning, I just left it in normal and I mucked around with the Regen Braking. I had it on like level 2. Level 3 is super aggressive. So yeah, I mean, it's saying I've got 151 miles. When I recharged it at Roberts, it said 178 mile range. I think though, what's great about VW now is because they've done a lot of lying and they now want people to desperately believe them, they're being really honest and open. So they're saying the new European driving rules say that this car will have 186 mile range, but actually they're saying in the real world it'll be 124. And I think they're playing it conservatively, because I think this car, in good weather like this, when I don't need my lights, my wipers, my heating, I reckon it will do 130 miles. This is a more involving car to drive, I would suggest, than the BMW i3 and certainly the Nissan Leaf. It was almost a bit of a token gesture by VW. I think they thought, well, everyone else is building EVs, we better have a go. They brought the e-up out, which had very short range, and then they brought the e-Golf out in 2014, and since then Dieselgate happened in 2015, and suddenly Volkswagen have shifted all of their R&D and all their focus and probably a lot of their PR from diesel to electric. And I think it shows with this car. So although this car visually doesn't look that different from the previous car, it's definitely an improvement all round. The whole car weighs just over 1,600 kilos, but like the way that VW can do it, it seems to disguise its weight. It doesn't feel heavy. When you're going into corners, it doesn't feel like it's carrying lots of bulk, and certainly all the heavy bulk is low down for low centre of gravity. It's got an 8-year warranty, the e-Golf, 8 years or 93,000 miles. So again, that's quite reassuring. To me, especially in this colour, it does look very plain, very kind of vanilla, ordinary. Not like cheap ordinary and not boring, but just conventional, and yet it's attracted a lot of people's eye. Robert's wife has fallen in love with it. She started looking around it, climbed in it, started taking pictures of it, and yet it doesn't look all that. I mean, it's got quite a boring grey cloth interior, it's a white car, it's not going to set the world on fire, but maybe this is the perfect EV gateway drug. I've said this before, but maybe people don't want EVs that look like radical and mad, whereas the Japanese with their, crazy looking Toyotas and crazy looking Hondas and BMW with the I series, which are quite mad. This is the total opposite. This is at the other end of the spectrum. This is like a really good novel with no illustrations on the cover. You just pick it up and go, oh, that's a good book. There is an option on this e-Golf for a heating module, which apparently takes heat off the EV system and from the air outside, like an air-to-air source heat pump. And in winter that can save up to 20% range, but that's optional. I think they've done a very good job actually at taking an existing car that wasn't necessarily designed to be electric and made it into an EV, integrated it very well with VW's new platform system. This is a cliche thing to say. If you're a motoring journalist, there are two cars that you nearly always get on well with, and that's a Volkswagen Golf and a Porsche 911. And it's cliche, and I don't like myself for saying it, but it is true. They're both very, very good cars. They have had their low points, but they're not that low. But this is a very, very good car, and it's a really good electrical adaptation. The e-Golf can be charged up to 40 kilowatts in power, so it'll do 80% charge in 45 minutes. Alternatively, you can use a 16 amp supply, you can use a 13 amp supply, a 3-pin plug, which will take about 17 hours, and that's your bookending of charging. But what I like from the few hours I've driven it is the range is trustworthy. And that's just driving it in normal, not trying to be super eco. And it's a Golf, guys. It's totally classless. It's what stealth wealth people drive around in. Nobody knows how rich or poor or mad or clever or whatever you are if you drive a Golf. And that's kind of cool about it. In fact, you could debadge this and no one would even know it was electric. You could just tell people it's a really refined petrol if you were like electrophobic. The GTE was very, very addictive to drive, and this does have enough things going on to be an involving drive. And of course the GTE does still use petrol, which means Robert would go for this one. I'd probably go for the GTE. You're not going to be disappointed. If you went out and tried a Golf, and that's the thing, try it before you buy it. Don't just take my recommendation on a car because you might prefer the 30 kilowatt Leaf or you might want something like the i3. But if you went and bought the e-Golf, I think you'd feel pleasantly familiar with it within minutes of getting into it. And that's something that Volkswagen's really honed over the years with the Golf. Electric or not, it's just a fine family hatchback. I think this would be a very good car to convert the doubters. The people that really don't think that they want an EV, they don't see the point, they don't get it. I'd like to just lend them this for a couple of days. I think it might change them. It's true.